Before I learned to speak English out loud, I learned to whisper it to the sky. This is not just my story. It's the story of anyone who ever dreamed of speaking a language, but had no one to speak to. If you've ever felt small, unseen, or uncertain, I hope this reminds you, you don't need perfect conditions to begin. You just need to begin. Let me tell you a story. The girl who learned English under a streetlight. I sat alone at the edge of the road, my feet tucked under me, a tattered notebook resting on my knees. The streetlight above me flickered, but it was the only light I had. Every night when the village sank into sleep, I returned to that same spot. Not to talk, not to play, but to study. English. I didn't know exactly why this language mattered so much to me. All I knew was that the books made my heart beat faster. The letters looked strange. The words didn't make sense, but somehow I believed they would open a door to something bigger than the world I was born into. No teacher had ever come to my village. The school building had broken windows and no electricity. But one afternoon, someone left an old English textbook on a bench near the well. I picked it up, even though I couldn't read the cover. That was the beginning. I didn't even know how to pronounce most of the words, but I copied them anyway. I traced every letter again and again, whispering the sounds into the darkness like little prayers. The others laughed at me. "Why are you talking to yourself?" they'd say. "You think you'll go to America or something?" I didn't answer them. I just came back the next night, and the next, and the next. The radio was broken, cracked on the side, with half the buttons missing. But one day, I turned the dial, and it whispered back. Faint voices, buried in static. Most of the time, it played songs in a language I didn't understand. But every now and then, someone spoke in English. I didn't know what they were saying, but the rhythm of it felt like music. Smooth, confident, alive. I pressed the broken speaker close to my ear and listened. I didn't care if I couldn't understand. I just wanted to hear it again and again. That radio became my teacher. I'd repeat every sound I heard, even when I got it wrong. I'd say it out loud, quietly, so no one would think I was strange. I copied words phonetically into my notebook. Sometimes I wrote entire sentences without knowing what they meant. I didn't even have a dictionary. But still, I kept going. One night, I heard someone say the alphabet, A, B, C, D, slowly, clearly. I was frozen. It was the first time I heard the English alphabet spoken all the way through. I rewound the old tape 100 times and copied it letter by letter over and over. That was my first full lesson. It didn't come from a teacher. It came from a broken radio under a flickering streetlight, and I never forgot it. People still laughed. They didn't know what I was doing. But I did. I was building something. Word by word. Sound by sound. Brick by invisible brick. The first time I spoke English out loud in front of someone, my hands were shaking. I was 13. A visitor came to our village, an aid worker wearing a faded green shirt and a kind smile. He spoke a little of our language, but mostly he spoke in English. I followed him everywhere, just listening, watching his lips, storing every sound in my mind like a treasure. I wanted to say something to him. Just one sentence. One sentence I had practiced for months. "Hello, my name is..." That's all I planned to say. That one sentence had lived in my notebook. I had whispered it into the wind 1,000 times. But saying it to a real person, that was different. He was crouched near the water pump, fixing the broken lever. I stood behind him, heart pounding. I almost ran away, but then I remembered why I started, so I said it. "Hello, my name is..." My voice cracked. I forgot the rest. I stood there frozen, feeling my face burn with shame. But then he turned around, smiled, and said gently, "That's very good. Very good." He didn't laugh. He didn't correct me. He just smiled. That moment, I felt something open inside me, like a door that had been locked for years. I had said something in English, and someone understood me. It was the smallest thing, but to me, it was everything. That night, I ran to the streetlight and opened my notebook. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just whispered the sentence again and again, louder now, with pride. "Hello, my name is..." I knew I had a long way to go. But for the first time, I also knew this. I could do it. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have the internet. I didn't even have a desk, but I had a notebook. It was old, with a torn cover and pages that had turned yellow around the edges. But to me, it was my best friend. Every blank page was a door waiting to be opened. Every word I wrote was a step closer to the world I wanted to reach. I wrote everything in that notebook. Not just vocabulary or grammar rules. I wrote my dreams in English. I wrote about the things I saw. The birds flying over my roof. The scent of rain. The sound of goats calling from the hill. I translated my life into English. Even when I didn't know the exact words, I tried. I made mistakes, of course, a lot of them, but I didn't erase them. I left them there to remind myself how far I was coming. Sometimes I drew pictures next to the words, hoping they would help me remember. A spoon, a tree, a sun, a streetlight. I talked to my notebook when no one else would listen. I asked it questions and answered them in broken English. "What is your name?" "My name is..." "How are you?" "I am happy." Even when I was not, some days I felt like giving up, especially when the words felt too heavy or the sentences too strange. But every time I looked at that notebook, I remembered how far I'd come. Page 1 was full of shaky letters and confused spelling. Page 50 looked like it was written by someone else, someone stronger. That notebook stayed with me through every season. I hid it under my blanket in the rain. I kept it in a plastic bag when I walked through mud. I never let it go, because it wasn't just a notebook. It was my hope. Every Sunday, our village held a market. It wasn't big, just a few stalls, a lot of noise, and the smell of grilled corn in the air. Most people came to buy and sell. I came to listen. There was a woman who sold secondhand clothes, and sometimes, only sometimes, she played English songs on a little speaker. That speaker was my window to the world. I would stand near her stall, pretending to look at shirts, but really I was listening to every word. "Excuse me? How much is this? Do you have it in blue?" Little phrases like that. Tiny expressions that flew past in the voices of travelers, shopkeepers, even tourists who'd somehow found their way to our market. I wrote them down as soon as I got home, but more than the words, I was learning the rhythm. The melody of English, how people asked questions, how their voices rose and fell. One day, a young couple passed by speaking English. I followed them from a distance, not to bother them, just to catch their words. They didn't notice me, but I noticed everything. "She's learning," the woman said, looking at a little girl reading under a mango tree. "She'll go far," the man replied. That sentence hit me like a wave. She'll go far. I repeated it under my breath until I memorized it. I didn't know if they were talking about me or someone else, but I borrowed those words and made them mine. I whispered them to myself that night. I'll go far. I didn't need a classroom. The world had become my classroom, and the market was one of my favorite teachers. There were no English classes in my village, no tutors, no lessons, no one to correct me or guide me. So I found someone else to talk to. The moon. At Tiain, night when everyone else was asleep, I would go outside, stand under the old tree beside our house, and look up at the sky. The moon was always there, silent, listening, so I spoke to it. At first, I only said simple things. Hello, how are you? My name is... I like the moon. It felt silly, but it helped me practice without fear. The moon never laughed, never interrupted, never judged me for my bad grammar or strange pronunciation. Then I got braver. I started telling the moon about my day. I told it how I helped my mother wash clothes, how I went to the market, what new words I had learned. I made up conversations in English, imaginary stories with imaginary friends. Some nights I would cry. Not because I was sad, but because the words were stuck inside me, and I didn't know how to let them out. So I poured them into the sky, hoping that somehow the moon would carry them further than I could ever reach. And little by little, my sentences grew longer. My voice grew stronger. My confidence grew deeper. No one knew I was doing this, but it didn't matter. I wasn't doing it for applause. I was doing it for freedom. Freedom to express myself. Freedom to dream. Freedom to one day speak without fear. The moon had no answers, but I wasn't looking for answers. I just needed a place to speak and be heard, even in silence. And every night under that pale light, I told myself one thing: I will keep going. It was a hot afternoon. I was walking near the edge of the village, where people dumped old furniture, broken pots, torn shoes, anything they didn't want anymore. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just wandering, thinking about the sentence I had practiced the night before. Then I saw it. A book lying face down in the dirt, its cover stained and its pages bent. I almost walked past it, but something made me stop. I turned it over and froze. It was an English dictionary, not a full one, not clean, not complete. Some pages were missing, and the spine was nearly torn in two. But still, it was a dictionary. Real English words with definitions and examples. I couldn't believe it. Picked it up with trembling hands and brushed off the dust. It smelled old, like wet paper and earth. But to me, it was beautiful. I ran home holding it like treasure. That night, I didn't go to the streetlight. I stayed inside with a candle and opened the dictionary. Word by word, I explored its pages like someone walking through a new city. I didn't understand everything, but I tried. I looked up every word I had written in my notebook, just to see what they really meant. Some of my guesses had been right. Some were far off, but I didn't feel ashamed. I felt proud, because now I could correct myself. I could grow. I could go deeper. That book changed the way I studied. I made flashcards out of cardboard. I read the same pages over and over. I even started making my own sentences using the definitions. I didn't care that it came from the trash. What mattered was what it gave me. Words. Real, living words that helped me tell my story better. That day, I learned something important. Not every gift comes in shiny wrapping. Sometimes the most powerful tools come from the forgotten corners of the world, and sometimes you don't find the book. The book finds you. Writing in a notebook was one thing, but writing to a real person, that was terrifying. Still, I wanted to try. I wanted to know if my English could reach someone beyond my village. There was a group of volunteers who sometimes passed through to deliver food and medicine. One of them, her name was Sarah, spoke slowly when she talked to the children. She wore glasses and always smiled with her whole face. I decided I would write her a letter. It took me 4 days to finish. I started with Dear Sarah and ended with Sincerely Me. I wrote about where I lived, my family, my dream of learning English, and how I practiced under the streetlight. I even asked her one question. Do you think one day I can speak English like you? I folded the letter carefully and gave it to her the next time she came to the village. I didn't expect her to write back. She was probably busy. She might even forget. But I had tried. And that felt like enough. 2 weeks later, my little brother came running with something in his hand. A letter. For me. It was from Sarah, written in neat handwriting on blue paper. She said my English was beautiful, that she was proud of me, that I should never stop learning, because she believed I could become anything I wanted. She answered my question, too. Yes, she wrote. I think one day you will speak English even better than me. I read that letter 100 times. Maybe more. Every word felt like a light inside my chest. That was the first time someone outside my family believed in my English. And that belief became a bridge between who I was and who I could become. I still keep that letter, even now. Because whenever I feel tired, whenever I feel small, I open it again and remind myself, someone saw me, and someone believed. Music had always been part of my journey. I listened to it through broken radios, overheard it at the market, and sometimes even caught a few lines from tourists passing by. But for the longest time, the songs were just sounds. Beautiful, emotional, sounds, but still just sounds. Until one day, I understood. It was late in the evening. I had borrowed an old music player from a neighbor who didn't use it anymore. The headphones were cracked, and only one side worked. But I didn't mind. I listened to the same English song over and over, trying to catch the meaning behind the melody, and then it happened. A phrase I had heard 100 times suddenly made sense. I believe I can fly. 4 simple words, but they landed in my heart like thunder. I paused the song, took a deep breath, and played it again. This time I heard more. I believe I can touch the sky. My eyes filled with tears. Not because the song was sad, but because for the first time in my life I understood the message. I didn't just hear English, I felt it. The words were no longer strange or far away. They were mine. That night, I sat under the streetlight with my notebook, writing down every line of that song I could remember. I looked up the meanings. I translated the emotions. I even sang along, quietly, not caring how I sounded. It was the first time I felt like English wasn't just a subject. It was a friend. A friend who could carry my hopes, my dreams, my fears. A friend who could help me express things I didn't know how to say in my own language. From that moment on, music became my favorite teacher. Not perfect, not structured, but powerful. Because it taught me the most important lesson. Language isn't just about words. It's about feeling something and passing that feeling on. I never planned to become a teacher. I was still learning myself, still making mistakes, still whispering sentences to the moon. But something changed the day. A little girl knocked on our door with a shy voice and a wrinkled paper in her hand. "Can you help me read this?" she asked. It was a short English passage from an old school book. I read it with her, slowly, gently. We sounded it out together, laughed at the hard parts, and celebrated the easy ones. The next day, she came back, with 2 friends. By the end of the week, there were 5 children sitting with me every evening under the same streetlight where I had once studied alone. At first, I was nervous. I told them I'm not a real teacher, but they didn't care. They listened with wide eyes. They repeated every word. They brought notebooks, crayons, chalk, anything they could use to learn. So I taught them the way I had taught myself, with patience. With mistakes, with stories and songs. We practiced the alphabet using songs from my broken radio. We played games to learn numbers and colors. We acted out scenes from markets and schools, pretending we were tourists and shopkeepers. It was simple. It was imperfect, but it was alive. And something magical happened. I started growing faster than ever before. Every time I explained a word, I understood it better. Every time they asked a question, I found answers I didn't know I had. I wasn't just helping them. They were helping me too. We weren't a classroom. We were a family, a circle of learners who believed that English could change our lives. And maybe, just maybe, it already had. Because in their eyes, I wasn't just a girl who studied under a streetlight anymore. I was a guide. I was proof that even without money, even without teachers, even without electricity, learning was still possible, and that meant everything. It was a sunny afternoon when I got the message. A local organization was offering scholarships to students who wanted to continue their education in the city. They were especially looking for those who had learned on their own, people like me. But there was one condition. The interview would be in English. I stared at the words on the paper for a long time. My hands began to sweat. My heart raced. This was the moment I had dreamed of and feared. I had studied every night. I had spoken to the moon, learned from the market, copied from a broken dictionary. But now I would have to face real people, trained people, fluent people. I thought about saying no. I almost threw the paper away, but something deep inside me whispered, "You didn't come this far to stop now." So I went. I wore my best clothes, clean, but simple. I carried my notebook in my bag, like a shield. The interview was in a small classroom with 3 people sitting behind a desk. One smiled. One took notes. One stared without emotion. They asked me to introduce myself. My voice trembled, but I spoke. They asked about my family, my goals, how I learned English. And then I froze. They asked a question I didn't understand. I tried to guess what they meant. I tried to respond, but the words got stuck in my throat. My mind went blank. The room felt quiet and heavy. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Can you repeat that?" One of them did, slowly, kindly. I answered, barely. But it was enough to move forward. When I left the room, I sat on the steps outside and cried. Not because I had failed, but because I felt small. I felt broken. I felt like all my learning wasn't enough. For a moment, I wanted to give up. But then I remembered the girl who sat under the streetlight, the girl who whispered English into the wind with no one watching, the girl who never had a teacher, but kept going anyway. She wouldn't give up, neither would I. 2 weeks later, I got the news. I was accepted. The city was louder than I had imagined. Cars honked constantly, people moved fast, neon lights blinked. All night, tall buildings stretched into the sky like giants. It felt like another planet. For the first time in my life, I had my own student ID, my own bed in a dorm room, a classroom with a real whiteboard, a library, a computer lab. I should have been excited, but instead, I was terrified. Everyone around me spoke English so fast. Their words flowed like water, but I was still learning how to swim. I understood only parts. I nodded and smiled even when I didn't catch everything. And when it was my turn to speak, I froze. Every single time. In class, I avoided raising my hand. I worried they'd laugh if I made a mistake. I worried I'd say the wrong word. I worried my accent would show I didn't belong. At night, I stared at the ceiling and thought, maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe the streetlight wasn't enough. But then I remembered the promise I made to myself years ago. I would never stop learning. I would never stop trying. I would never stop believing. So I took a deep breath and started small. I introduced myself to my roommate. I asked my teacher one question after class. I went to the library and borrowed a book with simple English stories. I joined a speaking club. Even though I was scared, I messed up a lot, but every mistake made me stronger. Every hard day taught me something new, and slowly, the fear began to shrink. Not disappear, just shrink enough so I could move through it. I wasn't fluent yet, but I was fighting, growing, becoming, and deep down, I knew this truth. The girl who learned English under a streetlight was now learning how to shine in a world of bright lights. It was my second semester when one of my teachers made an announcement. "There's a storytelling contest next month," she said. "In English. Anyone can join." My heart stopped. Storytelling? In English? In front of an audience? I almost looked away, hoping she wouldn't see me. But her eyes scanned the room, and then she smiled, right at me. "You should try," she said. I laughed nervously. "Me?" She nodded. "You have a story the world needs to hear." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat with my notebook, remembering all the pages I had filled under that old streetlight. I remembered the moon, the broken radio, the market sounds, the dictionary I found in the trash, the letter from Sarah. My whole journey was written across those worn-out pages. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did have a story. So I wrote, and for the first time, I wrote not just to learn, but to share. I wrote about the girl who had no teacher, no internet, no electricity, but who believed. I wrote every word with shaky hands and a steady heart. The day of the contest came. I stood on stage, palms sweating, legs trembling, voice tight. But as I looked out at the audience, I reminded myself of the truth. This wasn't just a speech. This was my life. And I had earned the right to speak it. So I began. My name is... And I told my story, from the dirt road to the city lights. From the first word I whispered to the last sentence I wrote. When I finished, there was silence. Then, applause. Real, honest applause. People stood. Some were crying. My teacher clapped the loudest. I didn't win first place, but I won something. Bigger, confidence, belief, a voice. That night, I walked home with my head high, not because I had impressed anyone, but because I had finally spoken my truth in the language I had once feared, and that changed everything. After the contest, something shifted. Students started coming to me for help. They asked how I learned English, how I practiced speaking, how I kept going without a school or a teacher. Some came with nervous smiles. Some came with broken confidence. All of them reminded me of me. And just like that, I became the mentor I had always dreamed of having. I didn't have perfect grammar. I wasn't a native speaker, but I had something more powerful: experience, patience, and heart. So I gave what I had. I shared every technique that worked for me: shadowing songs, mirror talk, talking to the moon, using a notebook as a friend. I helped them create daily routines, find free resources, and believe they could do it too. Not because it was easy, but because it was possible. One girl told me she thought she was too slow. One boy said he was too shy. Another whispered, "My accent is bad." I told them what no one told me. You are not too slow. You are learning in your own way. You are not too shy. You are just building courage. Your accent is not bad. Your accent is your story, and it's beautiful. I saw their eyes change, and each time I helped someone take one step forward, I took 10. I became more fluent, more confident, more free. Because teaching didn't just help them, it healed me too. I was no longer just a girl who had once learned under a streetlight. I was a light now, and I wanted to pass that light on to everyone who thought their voice didn't matter, because it does. I still remember the moment. I was sitting at a wooden table in the school library, reviewing English essays for a younger student, when I heard my name over the loudspeaker. "Please come to the director's office." I froze. Did I do something wrong? Was there a problem with my grades? My heart pounded the entire walk down the hall. My mind raced with worries. But when I opened the door, the director smiled. "Sit down," she said kindly. "I have something to share with you." She slid a paper across the desk. I looked at it slowly. A letter. A real letter. With a seal and a signature. It was an offer. A scholarship. To study abroad. An English program. In Canada. For a moment, the room went silent. My ears were ringing. My hands were shaking. "You were nominated by one of your professors," she explained. "They believe in your potential. And after reading your story, so do we." I read the letter over and over again. Fully funded. 1 year. Language, communication, leadership. I couldn't believe it. Me? The girl who whispered to the moon? The one who learned from trash books and broken radios? The one who once felt ashamed to speak? Now I was being invited to learn on the other side of the world. I walked out of that office in a daze. I didn't tell anyone right away. I just found a quiet place, opened my old notebook, and stared at the first page. A, B, C, D. It started there. And now here I was, standing at the edge of a dream I hadn't even known how to name when I began. That night, I sat under a new streetlight and whispered a new sentence. I'm going to Canada. And this time the words didn't feel impossible. They felt real. I had never been on a plane before, never even been to an airport. The night before my flight to Canada, I barely slept. I packed and repacked my small suitcase at least 5 times. I kept checking my passport, my documents, my acceptance letter, over and over like a rhythm of nervous hope. When I finally boarded the plane, my heart was pounding louder than the engines. Everything felt unreal. The seatbelt instructions, the cold air from the vents above my head, the flight attendants, walking by with trays. I sat by the window, hands clenched tightly in my lap, watching my country grow smaller as we rose into the sky. For the first few hours, I was frozen in my seat, too scared to speak, too shy to ask for anything, too overwhelmed to eat. But then something unexpected happened. A girl sitting beside me dropped her pen. I picked it up and gave it to her. She smiled and said, "Thank you." Then she asked, "Is this your first flight?" I nodded. "Mine too," she said with a laugh. We started talking. Her name was Amina. She was also going to Canada for a student program. She was nervous, just like me. Her English wasn't perfect, but she tried, just like I did. We talked for hours, about school, about home, about how strange and exciting everything felt. And for the first time on that long journey, I relaxed. Amina was my first friend on this new path, and her friendship became my lifeline. When we landed, we went through immigration together, picked up our luggage together, took our first step on Canadian soil together. It was cold. My breath turned white in the air, but inside I felt warm because I wasn't alone. My first flight had taught me something powerful. Even when you leave everything familiar behind, you can still find connection, and sometimes the sky is not the limit. It's just the beginning. The cold hit me like a wall. I had read about Canadian winters before, but nothing could prepare me for the real thing. The snow was everywhere, on rooftops, sidewalks, trees, and even inside the laces of my shoes. The wind stung my face. My fingers turned stiff, even with gloves on. I had never seen anything like it. But there was beauty in it, too. I remember standing outside my dorm, watching tiny snowflakes fall from the sky. I reached out my hand and caught one. It melted instantly. Delicate, quiet, pure. And in that quiet, I started learning new words. Frost, shiver, icy, slippery, bundle up, snowstorm, flurries, bitter cold. Every new word came with an experience. When I slipped and fell on an icy step, slippery. When I wrapped myself in 5 layers of clothes, bundle up. When I watched soft flakes dance under a streetlight, flurries. I kept a winter journal where I described everything I saw in English. I wrote about how my breath turned white in the morning, how the snow made the city silent, how the sky turned pink just before sunset. One night, I got caught in a snowstorm while walking back from class. I was scared, freezing, and unsure of the way. But I followed the footprints in the snow, just like I had followed words in my notebook years ago, and I made it back. That storm didn't just teach me how to walk carefully. It reminded me that every environment speaks a new kind of language. And if you stay open, you'll learn more than just vocabulary. You'll learn strength. You'll learn patience. You'll learn how to stand still in the storm. And listen. The room was bright. Clean whiteboards, organized desks, a clock ticking softly on the wall. It was my first time standing in front of a classroom, not as a student, but as a speaker. One of my professors had asked me to share my story with a group of Canadian students studying global education. I thought she was joking at first. Me? In front of native English speakers? She smiled. Exactly. You're the voice they need to hear. So I stood at the front of the class, hands shaking behind the podium, heart beating like a drum in my ears. I looked out at the students. Young, confident, fluent. Some stared, some smiled politely, some looked tired like it was just another morning lecture. And then I began. My name is Emma. The words came slowly at first, but they came. I told them about the streetlight, the notebook, the broken radio, the dictionary from the trash. I told them about the moon, the market sounds, and the day I understood a song. I didn't try to sound perfect. I didn't try to hide my accent. I just told the truth, in the best English I had, and something shifted in the room. The silence changed. Eyes lifted. Pens stopped. I saw tears in one girl's eyes. A boy leaned forward with both hands on the desk. When I finished, no one clapped right away. They were still holding the moment. Then, applause. Soft, warm, honest. My professor stood and said, "This is what resilience sounds like." I sat down quietly, but inside, I was soaring. That day, I realized something. Fluency isn't just about speed or accent or perfect grammar. It's about heart. It's about courage. It's about daring to speak, even when your voice shakes. And I had done it. I had spoken. And I had been heard. After that classroom speech, something began to grow in me, a quiet voice that said, "Give back." One afternoon, my professor approached me with an idea. "There's a volunteer program," she said. "You'd be perfect for it. It supports immigrant families and refugees who are just beginning to learn English. You could help." I said yes before I even thought about it. The first day, I walked into a small community center where parents and children sat in a circle. Some wore scarves, some wore winter jackets indoors. Most looked tired. A few looked afraid. I saw myself in them. I remembered what it was like to not understand the signs on the street, to be afraid to speak, to smile and nod, pretending I understood when I didn't. My job was simple: help them speak English. Basic conversations, everyday phrases, kind corrections, gentle encouragement. But what they gave me was far more. I saw a father practice saying "I love you" in English so he could say it to his daughter. I saw a grandmother write her name in English for the first time, her hands trembling. I saw a little boy help his mother fill out a form, translating word by word. They reminded me why language matters. It's not just communication. It's dignity. It's confidence. It's survival. Every time I heard them say a new phrase, my heart whispered, "You're doing something that matters, Emma." And every time they smiled at me like I had lit up their world, I felt that same light inside my chest. This wasn't about being fluent. It was about being present. It was about reaching back to those who were still where I once stood, and in helping them move forward. I moved forward too. The sun was shining, but the wind was cold. I wore a borrowed graduation gown and a cap that didn't quite fit. I stood among a sea of students in black robes, all waiting for our names to be called. I clutched the paper in my hand. My speech. Yes. Me. Emma. The girl who once whispered the alphabet under a streetlight was now the closing speaker at a real graduation ceremony in Canada. Before stepping up to the microphone, I took a deep breath, and I remembered the dirt road, the broken radio, the old dictionary, the moon, the notebook. The first time I dared to say, "Hello, my name is..." So before I began my speech to the crowd, I quietly unfolded a second piece of paper. It was a letter. To her, to the little girl I used to be. I didn't read it out loud. I just closed my eyes and spoke it silently in my heart. "Dear Emma, I know you feel small. I know your hands are cold under that flickering streetlight. I know you're scared no one will ever understand your voice. But please keep going. One day, your words will not only be understood, they will be welcomed. One day, you won't whisper, English alone into the night. You'll speak it to hundreds with pride. One day you'll stand in a classroom, a library, a stage, and you'll be the light. So don't stop. Not when they laugh. Not when you feel like giving up. Not even when you're tired and no one is clapping. Keep writing. Keep dreaming. Keep believing, because I promise you, it's all real. It's all waiting, and you are going to get there. Then I opened my eyes and stepped forward. My name is Emma, I began, smiling at the sea of faces. And today, I want to share a story. I used to believe that I was just a girl with a notebook, sitting under a flickering streetlight. But now I know the truth. I was never just learning English. I was building a bridge. One word at a time. One page at a time. One brave whisper at a time. And that bridge took me across oceans, to cold winters and warm classrooms, to speeches and stories and strangers who became friends. But more importantly, it brought me back home. Back to the place where it all began. Back to the very spot where hope first lit up inside me. And now, when I look at that old streetlight, I don't see a poor girl struggling in the dark. I see a spark, a beginning, a promise. Because I know now, you don't need perfect grammar to change your life. You don't need fancy books or expensive schools to chase a dream. You don't need to be fluent to be brave. You just need to begin, exactly where you are, with what you have. Even if all you have is a notebook, a broken radio, a quiet heart, and a little light, that's enough. Because from that light, you can create a language of your own. You can shape a future. You can lift others with your voice. And maybe one day someone else will whisper their first English sentence. Because you dared to whisper yours. My name is Emma, and I am no longer afraid to speak. Thank you for listening to my journey. Maybe it's also a part of yours. If you're still learning, keep going. If you're still whispering, keep speaking. And if no one has told you this today, I believe in you. Your voice matters, and one day, someone will listen and never forget it.